Good morning, and thank you for taking time out to be with us. I'm Wayne Galland, CEO of Epicon and your host for today. Welcome to the Honesty Sessions, a series of discussions where we take some of the biggest problems facing the modern day CIO and turn them into bite-sized pieces. So the first guest I have the absolute pleasure of introducing today is Chris Seller. Chris boasts an extensive career as a CIO and executive leader across a number of enterprise organisations in government and industry. Organisations including Air Services Australia, Westpac, Qantas and Jetstar. Chris, an absolute pleasure to catch up again. Thank you for your time. I just wonder if you can give the audience a brief introduction to yourself and importantly your background.
Great, thanks Wayne. As Wayne said, my name's Chris Seller. I've had about 30 years or so experience in the technology industry. I've had the pleasure of working with some of Australia's largest organisations, including Westpac and Qantas. And most recently, I was the CIO for Air Services. I recently retired from that position and I continue to provide some part-time consulting to Air Services on a very large change agenda they still have going on. My career's spanned a number of industries, including and career highlights, including large-scale technology and business change, enterprise architecture, technology strategy and program delivery, and it's been in the private enterprise and government.
Thanks Chris, great to have you, and I look forward to the discussion today and your inputs and insights. Next up, I'd like to introduce Marie Gearman. Marie's an enterprise service architect and an ITSM leader across our industry. Marie, great to have you here. Can we get a bit of background on yourself and a little bit about where you've worked and what brings you here today?
Yeah, thanks Wayne. I have been in the ICT industry for 19 years, mainly focused in the large outsourcing, and in the last 10 years across the federal government. Moved to Canberra in 2010 and it's largely been working with federal government from that point on. Over the last 10 years I've had the absolute pleasure in working in service management for the ATO and helping them to establish their enterprise management centre, which is a SIAM and service management capability that was established in about 2009 and has grown and continues to be successful. And I had a really fantastic 12 years with Lockheed Martin, and then and in that I got to work on a number of large service management and service integration projects. And then for Air Services for a great 4 years, working on their service management implementation, and of course what we're going to talk about today in terms of their data integration.
Thanks Marie, great to have you here today. Our third guest is Alex Jones. Alex is currently CIO of Powercall, United Energy and City Power in Victoria. Alex has held numerous executive leadership roles across the energy and resource sector. And in 2013, Alex was awarded CIO of the Year in Western Australia. Alex, great to have you here. Keen to get a bit about your background and hear more about yourself.
Sure, thanks Wayne. Yeah, basically I'm a corporate IT guy. I've always been a corporate IT guy. I've had the privilege to be a CIO now since 2011 with Synergy over in Western Australia and with the Victorian State Government prior to joining City Power, Powercall United Energy in 2018. So yeah, I've always kind of worked on that side of the business side, if you like, applying technology to the business rather than being a pure technologist. And I think personally that's a really, it's all about how you do the technology, how you bring it to the business rather than what industry you come from. So, you know, I've got experience. I spent 10 years with the Walt Disney Company overseas in Hong Kong and LA, as well as working for Foster's Group and for Curtin University over in Perth as a non-exec on their council. So that's really my background, is really doing IT and technology for a diverse range of businesses.
Thanks, Alex, and thank you for your time to join us on the panel today. So let's get to the first question and the main question of today. We all know the need to integrate data across the enterprise is growing more and more as organisations look to drive innovation, automation, and make better business decisions based on access to real-time data. But integration isn't easy, and we know many organisations spend lots of time, money and resources to get it right. So the key question, is it complex or complicated? Chris, can we start with you?
Yeah, thanks, Wayne. It's both, is the short answer. Modern CIOs have to deal with a myriad of issues in their environments today. Everything from large-scale, brittle legacy environments through to the massive transformational change that comes with the implementation of new digital systems. And I think as a CIO, you really need to be aware of what sort of problem you're facing. Is it a complicated problem or is it a complex problem? And the way I think about it is that complicated problems lend themselves to traditional approaches. Break the problem down into its components, figure out what's wrong with the components, reassemble it back into its whole. Complex problems are a different kettle of fish altogether. Complex problems are problems that deal with the unknown unknowns. There are things that you're not even aware of that could occur, and complex problems tend to be problems that come about through large-scale change, and we've seen that in air services a number of times, and particularly when we're doing change initiatives. A complex problem is often dealt with by discovery, experimentation, learning, and then applying some of the techniques that you would normally apply in a complicated situation. I think one of the things, Wayne, that we probably need to point out in the difference between complicated and complex is that complicated problems lend themselves to good engineering discipline, and over many years that becomes the way we do things, and dealing with complicated businesses can bias you towards solving everything with with the tools and techniques that work with complicated problems. When you're faced with a complex problem, you've got no idea what you're dealing with, and it requires you to let go of some of those biases and some of those previous experiences, and to learn and discover, and that's a different way of approaching a problem than the traditional scientific reductionist method, which is break the problem down to its parts, analyse them, put it all back together, and it should work. Complex problems don't lend themselves to that method.
Thanks, Chris. Marie, you've worked with a number of big integration programs over the years. Complex or complicated?
Yeah, both. I agree with Chris. I think if you look at how business operates and the complete complexity that's in every organisation, then by default I think every organisation has varying levels of complicated, and to integrate and to be able to bring all of that together is complex. So when you look at integration, data integration, they're both complicated and complex, given that the business runs in a highly complicated manner, and then you need to be able to view that business in its entirety, which is in itself very complex.
And Alex, for you, again, you've been involved in a number of large transformation programs over the years, working in very complex and complicated organisations. For you, are these programs complex or are they complicated?
I mean, I certainly agree with what Chris and Marie were saying. I think there's kind of two concepts that we use those words to describe. There's the concept of a problem which has got a lot of moving parts, that has a solution, that you've just got to really kind of unpick the spaghetti to get to the answer. And I think that's what we've been describing as complicated. And then there's the type of problem which there isn't really necessarily a right answer. There's just a lot of moving parts, and you've got to get to some kind of good outcome. You don't know if it's the best outcome, and you will never know. And certainly in my experience, it's good to distinguish between those ideas, because using this terminology, if you actually try to fully solve a complex problem, you don't really get there. You just want an outcome that's good. Versus a complicated problem, if you have a good process, you actually can solve. But if you misclassify it at the start, then you can get into trouble.
So I think we've got agreement that these integration programs have a mix of complex and complicated problems to resolve and navigate. Quite often I observe a number of organisations look to solve these problems through the introduction of new technology, but the reality is technology is only a small part of the puzzle. Chris, I might start with you again. What's key to actually navigating and solving these problems, and how do you successfully work through these problems to deliver the right outcome?
You're right, Wayne. Just having technology and tools isn't actually enough. You really need to be able to understand the problem that you're dealing with, and to understand the context of that problem inside the business. Tools can be very helpful with complicated problems. They can help you break the problem down into its components and analyse it. But it requires a deeper understanding of the environment and the business context that you're working in. And just applying tools isn't always the right approach. I mean, my experience in my career, we've tried to solve many business problems with the application of technology and tools, and that very rarely is enough. You really need to get deeper into the understanding of the business itself and the information inside the business to understand the type of problem you're dealing with and how to apply the tools.
And Marie, we'll touch on the recent program that you led at Air Services, but in your experience, what's key to success in actually delivering a good integration outcome across multiple complex and complicated problems and systems for that matter?
I think it's probably threefold. One would be really looking at what you currently have. So, along the lines of what Chris was saying in terms of understanding how your business works and the complications within the business. What business problems are you trying to solve? How does my business work, whether it be in discrete silos or whether it be a connected ecosystem, but really understanding what you have right now, and then the capability that you have as well. I think in my experience, a lot of integration programs start with a blank canvas, bringing in tools and technology to solve the problem, but ignoring to some degree what they have already in play. So their capability, what data they have, what information systems they have available that they can actually tap into and harvest. So I think you're right, tools are not always the answer. I think you've got to look to what you have and then what you need to complement that as a sort of final approach. How do you leverage what you have today, and then what gaps do you have? What tools and technologies can help your capability to grow?
Thanks, Marie. And Alex, you work in a very highly regulated environment, again, very complex in terms of its systems and tools, a lot of different complications to navigate, stakeholders to manage, the regulatory requirements we talk about. And we often hear a lot about large integration program failures and cost blowouts. In your experience and guidance, why do some of these programs fail, and what's key to success for you?
So I think often a reason for failure is biting off more than you can chew. Framing a problem to be so big and complex, to use the terms we've been talking about today, and trying to solve it all at once. So like Marie and Chris have been saying, you kind of have to frame the problem carefully enough that you can get to something that you know you can solve, and then you can build on that. I mean, an example from our industry is all of the data we collect from the smart meters, as they're known, the electrical meters that people have in their homes, and we use this to do all sorts of data science around predicting consumption and electricity flows. You can't just do all of that in one project. It's actually 100 different projects run by different experts who look at different angles, and from the technology point of view, from the IT point of view, what we do is we facilitate that. We provide the tools, we provide the environment, we help them, but ultimately it's not the technology that solves the problem.
Yeah, it's something that certainly we've talked a lot about in the past, and that's the need to look at more of an agile and iterative approach to a number of these particular projects and programs, and no one size fits all. And it's about looking at biting off small chunks that you can test, experiment, fail fast if need to, and then obviously learn from each one of those phases and move forward. So, Chris, I might come back to you. While at Air Services, you recently led one of the largest digital transformation programs in the organisation's history, and we at Epicon had the pleasure to work with you and your team to help solve some of the major complexities around the integration piece across very complex and complicated IT and OT systems. I was just wondering if you can give the audience a bit of background to the transformation program and importantly the outcomes you were looking to achieve.
Yeah, sure. Back in 2016, Air Services found themselves in a position where their revenues were declining and their operational costs were increasing, which is not a good formula for success. They undertook a very large-scale transformation program at that time, and one of the big centerpieces of that program was a major modernisation of their technology, but also they were looking at using technology to drive not only better productivity, but potentially new business models and new business outcomes. When we sat down and looked at the problem that they were facing, we were faced with an organisation that had been very successful for many decades, a very successful engineering team that had been looking at the management of safe navigation through our airspace for a long time. Predominantly analog-based technologies, and they'd been very successful. Many of those technologies came out of the developments of the big conflicts in the 20th century. When we came and looked at it in 2016, there was very little in the environment that was wrong, but it wasn't an environment that could easily be changed and could be adapted to modern ways of working and modern ways of delivering services. So in 2017, we put together a high-level roadmap for modernising the technology. And that roadmap was basically in 4 parts. The first part was the people and culture aspects. Very, very good engineering organisation. The system engineers were highly experienced in this part of the industry. They understood air traffic management, fire and rescue, and the systems that supported those initiatives very, very well. And we had a good ICT team as well, so technologists that understood about the business, how it worked, and how the data was consumed and managed, and we had the good bones for a capability. So we looked at that people and culture change to bring those 2 different teams together, very different cultures, and we set up a program to do that. That was the foundational stuff that we had to do. The second part of the strategy was all the enabling technology foundations that underpinned the organisation. So everything from the core infrastructure, the compute, the storage that ran the business of Air Services, and all the telecommunications that brought all of those components, from surveillance and navigation to the ability for an air traffic controller to talk to a pilot, telephony to run the business, etc. And while we were doing all of that, changing the culture, helping the people understand what the future would look like, all of the foundational technology being modernised, we had to get on and deliver a range of outcomes for the industry at large. So we were large programs to help the airports and airlines collaborate together with a program called Airport Collaborative Decision Making. It's a world first here in Australia, where we've brought the airports and airlines together, and the air navigation provider is the broker or the centre of that service. We were looking at long range, improving the long range predictability for the airlines when they were coming in from Europe and the US, how they get predictable landing times and how we could be very precise and understand the impact on the local operations. We are also looking at the modernisation of our core air traffic control system. It's a system that's been in for more than 20 years. It's being modernised. It's $1 billion program of work that's underway at the moment. And there are a number of other initiatives that had to be delivered out to the industry. So that was the third plank. We had to get on and do those big initiatives while we were changing the underlying foundations of the organisation. And then the fourth plank was really around the industry has been like this for decades. And we were seeing an increasing number of new entrants into the airspace. So we were seeing Google doing drone deliveries. We've got Uber with their Uber Elevate program, where they're looking to put flying taxis into Melbourne to get people from the outer Melbourne suburbs into the CBD and into the airport. They all fly at a lower altitude than what we currently manage. So that's a new way of thinking about that. And so the first plank of the strategy around the people and culture, the way I think about it, is that's a complex problem because you're dealing with humans, you're dealing with cultural change. There's a whole range of unknowns that come into that one. The modernisation of the core technology is a complicated problem. We know what we have to do. We know how to break it down into its parts, put it back together, and make sure it works. The delivery of large programs out to the industry, the third part of the strategy, again is a complicated problem. We know what we have to do. Big programs of work. You've got to structure them and get on and deliver them. And then the fourth one is really the classic unknown unknowns. What do we do with these new aircraft that are flying in our airspace? Some of them are small, some of them are going to be quite large, carry people. It's a totally different paradigm to the air traffic controller talking to a pilot. It's a machine that's flying autonomously or in an automated trajectory. There is no pilot involved in a traditional sense. What are we facing there? How do we deal with that complex problem? So when we put all that together and we looked at that strategy, we suddenly realised that we didn't have any of the capability to support all of the integration of those moving parts. The traditional analogue assets and systems that supported air traffic control for many decades, and the new digital systems that were coming online, we had no idea about how we were going to actually support all that, and that's how we started our engagement with Epicon. We talked to many organisations about how they would go about doing that. Is it a tool problem? Is it a data integration problem? When you've got billions of messages flying around your environment, it becomes complicated, starts to move into complex. Our engagement with you guys has really been very helpful in helping us understand how this change program and all those moving parts will be managed into the future.
So Marie, strategy is one thing, and Chris has just outlined a huge transformation program where there's transformation at a technical level, transformation at a business level. We're moving from legacy to old from a systems and technology perspective. You're implementing new enterprise systems and applications in a very complex environment, regulatory requirements, and a lot of stakeholders to manage. You were tasked with obviously the key piece of integrating across a number of those legacy and new platforms, which wasn't an easy one. Can you take us through, I guess, firstly your approach to do that, and really what you achieved and how you ended up achieving the result you were looking for?
We basically had the service management capabilities to stand up, I think, as an initial piece of the puzzle. So when Chris talks about the foundation and the people capability and ways of working, they were very much in a routine, an engineering routine, and this is how we run the day-to-day. And so our first approach in trying to get the operation to support the strategy was to really look at people capability and process. And what we found in that plan, and as we were going through trying to align to Chris's strategy and to figure out how to structure that an execution plan, we looked at our capability really closely. How do we run the operation day to day, and how were we going to make these changes basically in flight, and how are we going to make sure that we can structure ourselves to do that. So initially started setting up common tooling, common processes, a SIM structure, a service management structure. And then I had the day-to-day situational awareness as well, to structure a plan around how do we bring all of our systems and technologies together so that we can manage at a complex layer. So I think it's really important to note that in air services at the time, every system that we have is large. It's complicated, and they all work by design in discrete silos for safety and management of the system. And that is how they've been operating for a long period of time. So in terms of an approach, the goal really was, how do we get the information? How do we get it quickly now that we have, pretty good service management structures in place and we can run the day-to-day, we can manage the complicated. We have processes in place that can manage that. But how do we get a view of the whole environment so that we can help to shape the strategy of moving the organisation and transforming it when there's all these unknowns. We can't get a hold of the data, we don't know how the day-to-day operates, and really trying to pull that together. So I've started a plan for modernisation, specifically around our operational day-to-day activities and our situational awareness capability, so that we could enable the strategy, so that we knew where our resources were, we knew what our problems were, we could start to do some predictions about how situations were going to get managed, and also allowing for a layer of building capability so that our teams could respond to this new strategy, this transformation activity that was coming at us from many dimensions across the business. And we set out basically to look for a partner to complement our existing team. As Chris has alluded to, we have a huge and very capable engineering team, very strong safety culture, and very rigid ways of operating when it comes to building systems. But in terms of managing the environment as a whole, it was almost overwhelming for the existing teams that were very much used to looking at their individual systems. So we studied the capability, and we realised that we need to bring in help. We need to bring in partners and technology that can complement our team. So that was the approach that we looked at. We looked at what we had, what we needed, in terms of help and a complementary capability, and then how do we move those two together at the same time in order to be ready. I think it's really important to note, in order to be ready to execute such a complex strategy, and to do it in the quickest possible time, of course.
Yeah, I understand, and certainly from an Epicom perspective, it was one of the most complex and difficult integration programs and projects we've been involved in. 47 different OT and IT systems, very complex and complicated data sets that were very difficult to understand and map to business rules. But I think it's fair to say as well that you probably didn't get the outcome you were looking for in your first attempt, and it was probably a little bit of luck that we came together and were able to work together to solve some of your problems. Take us through what didn't work in the first couple instances and tries that you had, and I'm keen to understand what the difference was in the end to get the result we achieved.
Yeah, you're right, Wayne. It was hit and miss there for what felt like a long period of time. We were working very, very hard on the organisational culture within the team, ready to embrace partners who could come in and help them, get the existing team to understand A, we needed to change, and B, we were going to bring in partners to help us do that, and we were also going to bring in new technologies. So that was actually a huge piece of work to get the cultural change of the people really moving along. And once we did that, we started to introduce software partners who have the capability to actually help us drive forward. What we found in reality was that a lot of those software partners, yes, they have great systems and they can definitely bring in capability, but it was on a complicated level. It was for niche pieces of the environment, particularly a high level of expertise in the traditional ICT, as Chris alluded to before, the compute storage, etc. Absolutely bringing in tools and capability that could bring that together. But our OT system, our safety and regulation environment, overwhelmed some of the partners that we were working with, and we learnt a lot about what software solutions that were in the market, and maybe our approach was wrong in looking for tools, and that we need to start looking for more integration capability. And so, yes, you're right, it was a little bit of luck that Chris said, how about you come and meet Epicon? And I, at that point in time, to be perfectly honest, I didn't want to meet another software company. I'd already resigned to the fact that this wasn't going to work, and we were going to have to do a 5-year plan. I started talking to the exec about it's going to take 5 years to do this modernisation. But at the request of Chris, I attended the meeting. Of course, the solution put forward was impressive. I actually knew some of the team, so I knew the people capability was there. It was just a matter of having brought in software companies before, having a look at the system and then saying, no, Marie, you need to start again. We can't integrate this legacy technology, or we can't, this ATM system or this OT system, we don't understand what they are. Our software tool can't talk to them. I was a little bit in a place where I said, I think we need to do a proof of concept. If we're going to talk to one more company, we're going to take a proof of concept approach, because it's going to be too hard for my team for me to change the culture and rev them up again and then bring another software company in, and the team look at me saying, I told you we couldn't do this. So we went about engaging Epicon and saying, okay, we see you have really great capability, we see you have really great IP and a solution we think can help us, but let's prove it out. And as you know, Wayne, we weren't easy on Epicon because we really wanted to test, and if that gives the audience some understanding of how frustrated we were at that point, we got together and formulated, I guess you could call it your traditional use case. What were we going to actually build into this proof of concept? And I said, well, let's just do the hardest ones, because if we can do the hardest systems that we have, we should be able to do everything else. And what we got at the end was a bit of a shock, to be honest with you. Nobody expected to get the result that we did through that lab and through that learning. About 80% of the time that we worked with you and the team, Wayne, we spent doing a lot of understanding the system, trying to convince people we can connect without breaking anything, and that everything was going to be okay. This is how we were going to get the data. So about 80% of the time spent really understanding how do we get the data that we have. And it very quickly, I think within weeks, the 20% of the project produced the complex views that we had never seen before. So by pulling our air traffic control, our radar system, our legacy monitoring or ICT system all together, was the first time that we had seen our live data, our very complicated data sets all together in this ecosystem view. And what we were able to do from that very quickly was start to realize we had the capability inside the team once we had the data to understand how to use it. And then we started solving unknown problems we'd never seen before. And so we could see that, this particular system was generating this much workload, and this data set was actually could be removed, and these these rules here are old and can be replaced. And this happened very rapidly once we had this view of the data. And I think, when we looked at the project and we did a review of it end to end, we looked back and said, we really spent very little time building that view because we had the right partner, we had the right capability. And we were able to structure a program of work then that was going to get us a rapid outcome. Where before that, we were looking at a 5-year journey.
It's a good point that you make that we spent a lot of time really getting to the data and understanding how we could get access to the data. And just as much time working across the various stakeholder groups and ensuring that we had everyone involved that needed to be involved and was okay with the process of, one, getting access to the data, but then two, understanding the data and the business rules that related to that data. So there's certainly a lot of challenges there, and going back to what we mentioned earlier on, it's not about the tools or the technology. It's often more about the data and the stakeholder groups and managing those aspects as part of any integration program. So I've got to ask the question, did you get the outcome you were looking for?
We did. Look, the outcome we were really looking for was how do we pull these big systems together and really see the situational awareness end to end, and then we could respond to Chris's strategy. We could really move through some of this transformation once we had a good view of our ecosystem. So being able to pull 47 systems, various technologies, various ages, very complex data sets together, and be able to see that on a view. Yeah, we got the success we were looking for. But I think it's important to note that only came about from the partnership level. I mean, the tools and technologies and IP, fantastic. But the listening, the understanding where we were, the appreciation of, okay, I am dealing with an engineer who's very sensitive about his system. I am dealing with, some serious safety and regulatory compliance issues, and helping us to navigate through that through listening and understanding the business and getting into the complicated while keeping an eye on the complex strategy that we were trying to achieve. So I think, you're right, the tools and technology are wonderful, but having the right partner to really understand, I've got to complement the team, I've got to get into this environment, and I've got to get moving very quickly as part of the team. That was a huge difference than let's call them the mistakes we made in the beginning, when we thought we'd just bring in a partner who could bring in some technology and it'll all happen for us. It wasn't that simple.
No, I understand. So Chris, obviously a good outcome in the end. Just interested in any other final thoughts or insights or learnings or takeaways that you took away from the program?
I can remember that meeting with Marie when I said, hey, I found somebody that can help again. And quite frankly, we didn't expect the outcome that we finally got. We'd seen many organisations come and go, said they had the answer, but they could solve part of the puzzle, some of those silos, but they couldn't do it, the integration end to end. And I think when I think back on it, the capability Epicon brought, it was really three things. That was that capability, so they had some deep capability in the organisation and the tools and the systems. They also had a lot of experience, so they didn't actually, the guys that they brought in didn't actually say, yep, we can solve this, we can connect that 30-year-old radar SCADA system into your monitoring system, and you will solve all your problems. They actually realised it was going to be hard, so that indicated they did have some experience, these guys. But I think one of the key things for us was the attitude. I mean, it was really a can-do, we're going to solve this problem for you guys, we're going to help get it done, was really key. And and Marie's right, she was very, not another one, we're going to go through all this again to start with. And for me, it was the change in Marie as we went through this process that really was a validation that the Epicon guys were delivering some tremendous value. And I think, the system that we've set up, the service management system that's now been set up is a foundation for us to be able to grow and expand as we bring more of the digital technology in to replace the analog and to manage the environment while we've got that transition underway over the next decade or so. So it's been a really good experience, and I think we got a really good result so far. Not finished, but good so far.
Not finished, there's still more to go, but I think we've made great progress, and it's been great to work with both of you through this particular program. So thank you. Look, Chris, Marie, Alex, some great insights and experience there, and it's been great to have you at the table and to explore this discussion further today. And I think we can certainly take a number of takeaways out of the conversation. It's both complex, it's complicated. I've made a few notes here that I think it's worth recapping on. First, obviously, that we've talked about all of these programs, they do have complex and complicated issues to navigate and resolve. And each one of those complex and complicated requires a different approach and a different task and a different set of eyes and approaches to resolve those particular problems. We've really captured the point that it's more than just technology. Technology is one key part, but it takes a lot more than the technologies to resolve a lot of these particular integration issues and challenges. And I think the old adage that we often at Epicon talk about is it's all about the data, and understanding the data, getting access to the right data, and then using that data to actually populate views and making sense. That's where the real hard work and the value comes from. So certainly it's more than just the technology. The importance to take an agile approach and an iterative approach. So one size doesn't fit all, so important to actually break the program down, the project down, and the stages down into bite-sized pieces. Experiment, learn, move on, and take that approach through the whole program. And that's certainly a lot of value that came out of the air services experience that we've had. And finally, I think, Marie, you've touched on importantly is importance of having an ecosystem of partners, both technology and service integration partners that work together and that can understand the business change you're going through, the technology change, but importantly lead across both technology and business to bring it all together. So, and again, that's more than just technology, it's more than just business, it's a partner that can navigate and work across all aspects of the program that's really helped you achieve the outcome you were looking for. So look, thanks again. It's been a great discussion. Don't go anywhere though, and same for our audience today. Don't go anywhere. Up next, we have the live Q&A. Well, welcome back, guys, and to our live Q&A. And here's an opportunity. We've covered a lot of ground over the last 40 odd minutes, and a great opportunity now to engage with our panel and obviously ask some questions. Everyone should see that you've got a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Feel free to tab into there and type in your questions. I can see a number of people already found the Q&A, and we've got a number of questions that have come through. Marie, we might start with you. I've got a question here for you that I think you can assist with. How did you convince stakeholders and your management, I guess, to actually be open to bring in third-party organisations, software vendors to help solve these problems?
Yeah, it's a good question.
We've really looked at our current capability quite closely. We spent a lot of time understanding how the business operates, how our current team interacts with the business, and what we had available to us. And I think that's really important to understand. What do you have? What talent do you have? How do they use those talents on a daily basis? How are they managing the challenges of the business? How are they meeting your various customer demands? And then shape the third parties that are going to complement that capability. Bring only third parties in where you have gaps. Because I think it's when you bring in third parties that maybe duplicate the current effort is when you usually have failure because you have quite a lot of tension. I think that's a really good place to start, is to complement what you currently have.
Thanks, Marie. Next question, probably open to the panel. So Chris, might start with you, but how do you get stakeholders, both internal and external, to actually let go of their biases when approaching these types of challenging, complex issues and problems?
Yeah, thanks, Wayne. It's very difficult to make the case for this kind of initiative. I can remember an early conversation with our CFO, and his response was, "Why do we need to spend this amount of money on support for the systems and the integration?" He said, "When I've got a problem, I just call you and it gets fixed. Why do I need to spend any more money?" And so making the case, particularly for this sort of service management integration, is really, really hard. And we spent a lot of time trying to build the case around the facts and getting data to support the environment. So today, in a highly regulated, safety critical environment, we have many layers, fail-safe layers. So the delivery out to the industry of air traffic control relies on systems, but also relies on people and processes and things. And when we have system issues, then the processes and other things kick in. So the end-to-end delivery of the service actually looks pretty good. And then Marie did some great work with the data that came out of the work we did with you guys, that she could actually show that some of our systems weren't getting the 5 nines reliability everybody thought. They were actually getting maybe 80-85% availability. And once you start to get those facts, then that goes into the case, and then people start to pay attention. The other thing that we needed to do was to make the case that just because we do it today doesn't mean that same technique that we use for analog systems will apply to the digital systems of the future. When we move to a scenario when you don't have air traffic controllers talking to pilots, but we have machines talking to machines, that's a whole different support organisation and capability than beyond what we have today. So it's making that case and taking the various stakeholders through that.
Thanks, Chris. Alex, and for yourself, I mean, how do you work with those vendor suppliers and also internal stakeholders to try and address some of those biases that it may bring to some of those complex problems?
So I think it's fair to say that a lot of very capable people, stakeholders, whatever you want to call them, often struggle to distinguish between a problem that is actually quite easy to solve from a technology perspective and a problem that's really difficult to solve. And so I think a lot of the influencing that we try to do is try and steer people towards asking for the right things and asking the right questions, because where we have experience, I suppose, in our profession is being able to understand what's achievable and make it happen. And there's nothing worse than somebody coming along and asking you for something you just can't give them. So I think it's about shifting that conversation towards, what can we do? What options are there? I think with external providers as well, it's the same thing. You bring in that new angle and you drive the conversation down the path of what's possible rather than being too fixated on a specific outcome or issue.
Thanks, Alex. Marie, a few questions coming in around the Air Services program. First one, you talked a bit about partnerships. Who were the technology partners that you have in delivering the whole outcome? So I think I've lost Marie there. So Chris, I'm not sure if you've got technology partners were and what role they had in the outcome.
Yeah, so there's a range of partners. You know, the provider of the core air traffic control platform that we use was key to this. We had to work with them very closely. The network provider, the providers of the radio systems and the radar systems, and then our own internal organisation, IT organisation, our own internal engineering organisation. We treat them as providers of of the information that we need and the cooperation that we need. So there was quite a range, and your team, when they came in, they had to work with all of them to understand the environment and what the sources of the data was, and how they were going to source it, and what the protocols were, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, it's a very complex environment, and where some of the other initiatives that we'd started that were trying to achieve a similar outcome had failed is there was some hard issues with some old systems that caused the data sourcing of the data and getting it, aggregating it, and then analysing it. A lot of systems are built with more contemporary digital systems in mind, and what you guys did, I think, was work with some of those partners to sort out how you can get your hands on that data, what was inside that data, how to parse it and then integrate it and store it and that sort of thing. So some of that was a complex piece of work where you had to work with providers of those quite old systems. A radar system can last 30 years. And when we install a very expensive radar system, it comes with its own monitoring. And as you put new ones in, the old ones are still there, the new monitoring is different. And so you end up with, you've got 12 or 15 primary radars, you end up with 12 or 15 monitoring systems for them. And they're all different generations and different levels of capability. So that's where some of the complexity came in, and working with those partners and providers of those radar systems was one example.
Sorry, Wayne, can you now hear me? Am I back?
So Maria, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah, great. Apologies. I'm not sure if it's my internet connection there, so apologies. So in terms of the technology vendors that we worked with and you worked with in particular, do you want to elaborate on that further?
Yeah, so as Chris was saying, we have quite an extensive number of parties that bring the air services technology to life on a daily basis. And in order to, I guess, bring that together, we chose ServiceNow as our core product, and really wanted to integrate everything that was the day-to-day operation into that system. And as Chris was saying, a lot of our technology is built to last and has a very long life cycle, and oftentimes it's difficult for a technology like ServiceNow to interpret or be able to understand the patterns of those systems. And so we found that we could use a tool like Splunk to get to the end level and collect the data, but get it from the end level to ServiceNow was actually quite complicated. And one of the reasons for that is obviously we don't have a standard ICT environment. The patterns in those technologies largely based on standard ICT, and although they can be developed, we didn't really know where to start. And so that's, I think, where we looked at the Epicon capability to Splunk on the end collection, ServiceNow as our main interface, if you will. And then the platform in the middle was the E1X platform from Epicon, which allowed us to interpret the endpoints quickly, establish patterns in data, and then feed what was relevant through to ServiceNow, which actually took a lot of interference out of the day-to-day operation. That was really the aim of those three technologies.
No, thanks, Marie. And another one for you that's come in, and this one's more related to really engaging end users to be able to get a view of what the challenges are that end users have. And so how did you go about engaging the end users and bringing their challenges forward, so through the program you could address those elements as part of the program?
Yeah, I think Dean raised a really good point about, the users not often sharing their problems, not telling you, or not even really understanding what they need, or being able to express in words, I wish the system could do this. And so for me, with the main customer that I have, it was air traffic controllers. So they needed a lot of information. They were using systems that were kind of piecemeal. They had to kind of pull it all together on a daily basis. So I think one of the most important things about understanding what they need is spending some time with them and shaping up the sort of story for them. Okay, I've looked at what you do every day, and here's what I think will enable you. Because I think the time when end users are able to keep up with the technology can do this for me. A lot of our people were really just focused on running their business unit and doing what they were hired to do on a day-to-day basis, and not really understanding technology had moved along, and that they could get all these things in real time, or they could see, data spliced in different ways to make their life easier. So I think it is really hard to get them to express their problem without sort of telling you, well, this is what the technology I think can do for me. But I think spending the time with the business, understanding how it functions, and then offering solutions up proactively is probably something that, we spent a great deal of time doing even before we engaged vendors, because then we could really say, okay, this is the outcome we think the business is looking for.
Yeah, you make a good point. We've probably got time for one more question. So this one's probably Alex and Chris, it's a CIO question. So what advice would you give a CIO faced with integrating across IT, OT systems and large amounts of unstructured data? Alex, we might start with you.
Advice on integrating data. I would say listen to the people who own the data, work with them, be led by them. I would rather be led by a person who really understands the data and doesn't know quite what to do with it or how to do it than attempt to kind of put them in a box and tell them what to do. So sometimes they lead you down the wrong path, because the amounts of data that we've got in these businesses, you've spoken about it already in your area, Chris and Marie, but we've got just ever increasing amounts of it, and what you can do, there's no end to it. So I would be saying, don't drive, really, be the co-pilot, like go with them, go where they want to go, and you'll get something out of it, and that will give you that will earn you the right to kind of do the next project.
Yeah, and picking up on that, I guess the advice I give is don't try and boil the ocean. Start with the bits that build confidence, particularly with your stakeholders, and make sure you get a good conceptual architecture in place that underpins where you want to be and how you want to tackle the problem.
And don't rush in and buy a bunch of tools up front. Make sure you understand clearly what you're trying to achieve, and then be prepared to pivot as you start to learn and discover, as you start to get more and more success and do more of the integration. You will learn more about the environment and the challenges, and don't start with a big business case up front. Start small, build confidence, win the stakeholders.
Thanks, Chris. Very conscious of time. There's a few questions we won't have time to get to, so we'll arrange a response to those questions. Marie, Alex, Chris, thank you so much for your time today and sharing some of your experiences and learnings through your many years of integrating and running large programs. To our audience, a huge thank you for your participation today and taking time out of your diary. I also want to call out a thank you to Splunk and ServiceNow, our key partners, who really allow for these industry activities and events to happen. So thank you to Splunk and ServiceNow. Look, I look forward to talking to many of you over the following days and weeks, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks for joining us.